Long, long ago, in the days of castles and knights and kings and queens, there was also a whipping boy. A whipping boy was a boy chosen from the village to come live in the castle and play with the prince, study with the prince, but above all, keep the prince out of trouble. Well, this story is about Prince Edward and whipping boy John. Prince Edward loved to get into mischief. He wasn't a bad prince, but he loved to do things that were just ornery or he didn't think. And it was the whipping boy's job to stay right behind him and remind him not to do things that would get him in trouble. Well, one day they were out in the courtyard playing, and the prince decides he wants to practice with his bow and arrow, but he needed something to shoot at. So he decided he would get an axe and chop down the apple tree. And when the whipping boy heard the axe, he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I need apples. I need something to shoot my bow and arrows on. I'm going to take these apples. I'm going to line them up on the wall so I can pull back my arrow and knock them off." The whipping boy was so upset. He said, "You can't do that. You have now destroyed the royal apple tree, and they were going to use those apples for the ball on Friday night." Well, just then the guard comes running because he heard all the commotion. "What in the world is going on out here?" "What have you done?" Well, the prince didn't get in trouble. Just then the guard grabs John by the arm and drags him down to the dungeon. He gets 10 lashes with the whip, and then he is put in the dungeon for 4 hours of timeout. In the meantime, Prince Edward doesn't know anything that's going on down there. All he knows is he's having a grand time with his bow and arrow and shooting down those apples. It was fun. Well, once the time was up, the whipping boy had to come back up and follow behind Prince Edward, trying to keep him out of trouble. Well, several days went by, and they were out in the courtyard again, and the prince decides he is going to cause more mischief. He takes his axe, and he hits it against the wall, making a doorway, so he doesn't have to walk all the way to the other side of the courtyard just to open the door. So that's what he does. And now he can go in and out of the little hole he made. But you guessed it, the guard heard the noise and comes and grabs whipping boy John by the arm, drags him down to the dungeon and whips him with 10 lashes and puts him in timeout. Well, the whipping boy is sitting down there crying because that was very painful, while Prince Edward is still having himself a grand old time. Well, that night, whipping boy John thinks about it, and he says, "I've got to do something." So what he decides to do is, once Prince Edward has gone to sleep, he is going to go into his room and switch out their clothes. He knows that the servants go in and lay out his clothes for the next day each night. So once everybody was quiet and the whole castle was still, he quietly goes into the prince's room, takes his clothes and lays them out, and then takes the prince's clothes and brings them into his room. The next morning, Prince Edward gets up and puts his clothes on like he always does. He didn't notice what they were because he didn't care. Whipping boy John puts on Prince Edward's clothes, and they both go out to play. Well, while they're out there playing, the prince decides he's going to get into some more mischief. And he goes in the garden and he starts digging huge holes. And John says, "Prince Edward, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm digging holes so I can bury treasures. You know, I'm pretending I'm a pirate." "You can't dig up the flower garden." Just then the gardener comes out and he says, "What are you doing?" He said, "I wanted to bury some treasures. I'm a pirate." You can't do that. Look what you've done to the royal garden." The gardener grabs the whipping boy, at least that's who he thinks it is, drags him down to the dungeon. But as he's dragging him, Prince Edward is screaming, "I'm the prince! You can't do this to me!" He says, "Ah, can't trick me. I know who you are." Drags him down to the dungeon, gives him 10 whacks with the whip, and puts him in the dungeon for timeout for 4 hours. When the 4 hours is over, Prince Edward comes upstairs with a very sad look. He goes out in the courtyard and finds John. He says, "John, I am so sorry. I had no idea that they were taking you down there and whipping you like that. I will try my best to do better." And from that day on, with John's help, Prince Edward did much, much better. Now, once in a while, he'd get in trouble. But as the years went by, he grew to be a very, very good person. And when he was old enough, he became king. He ruled his country with kindness. He was great at what he did. And it's all because of what John did to help Prince Edward.